There we go. Right, recording. So now let's talk about what we're actually going to do today and why, because I'm aware that you've got the questions of why am I still doing it? So I'm not going to answer individual questions now. So if you start typing those into the Q&A box about, well, how's this going to look like? What's this going to look like? If I talk about my classes, I know you've done 3 test papers already, and some of them went well for you and some of them didn't. And we were going to have PPEs next week. Now, we are going to come back to school at some point, and we are going to be assessing you again in different formats. Exactly what that format looks like is not something that is decided, because we don't know when we're coming back to school and we don't know how much time we'll have, but we are going to assess you. Because we're going to be entering teacher assessed grades for your GCSEs. Now, we've already got an idea of how you're doing, and you know, I certainly know that there's 2 classes here that I teach, and you know that I've got a good idea about how you're progressing and how much better you're getting. And we've got an opportunity to do that with some other topics. So what we're going to do over the next 6 weeks, because we're definitely all at home, or you can say I'm in Mr. Timmins' lab at the moment, actually in school, but we're all learning online for the next 6 weeks. There are 6 units in science. So what I'm going to do is each week, I'm going to go through 1 unit. I'm going to go through what the key points of that unit are, and I'm going to set you on your way to being able to revise and test yourself on that unit. There are going to be some things where you test yourself, and there are going to be some things that are going to come to your teachers to allow us to have a look at how you're doing in that unit and to give you some feedback. Going through these activities will make it easier for you to complete any assessments that we set you, whether those are past papers or papers that we've designed ourselves. If you go through these things as if you were just revising for your PPEs, that is what's going to get you through those assessments. And I know lots of you were revising for them anyway. So this is also an opportunity for you to show your teachers what you are able to do in terms of some of those questions. You need to be clear that this webinar is for Science Combined, and that's for everybody. This isn't foundation or higher, this is Science Combined. So some of you are going to find some of it very easy. Some of you are going to find some of it very hard. You obviously need to stick to the bits that you know are designed for you. So let me get started. So I decided to start with B2. Why B2? Well, when you came back from the last national lockdown back in September, we went through P2 that we'd done offline, and we taught that really quickly in a short space of time, and then we assessed you on it. And actually you did, as a year group, you did far better than you all said you were going to do. Then we did B1, because that was the thing that you had done all the way back at the beginning of year 9. And again, we did that in a really short period of time. We revised it, we assessed you on it. As a year group, you did extremely well. And then we went through C1, again, something that you'd done in year 9. And I think most people have done better in that, I think, than they thought they would. Now, so the units that are left, B2, C2, and P1, okay? So those are the units that we have done nothing to do with in year 11. We have no assessments on you during year 11 for those units. So we're definitely going to need to do that. And you haven't had an opportunity to revise any of it in class. So we're going to start with that. Next week, I'm going to do C2. The week after that, I'm going to do P1. And then I'm going to go back through the other 3. I'm not suggesting this is the only B2 revision that you do. I think that would be foolish. So one of the things I think that is important that I have said over and over again when I've done webinars on how to revise, the first thing you have to do is get yourself a list of what is in your topic. So here's a very basic list of what is in B2. It's the one that began with the nervous system. You probably did the ruler drop practical. That's my demonstration of the ruler drop practical. And you looked at reflex arcs. And then you went on into hormones and homeostasis, and you probably remember the names of the different hormones. Perhaps you talked about testosterone and estrogen, and perhaps looked at the control of the menstrual cycle and fertility. You looked at reproduction. You do need to be able to label the reproductive system, as well as being able to explain contraception and hormonal control of fertility. Then we've got variation in genetics, and you might have done those genetics crosses, looking at whether offspring were going to have blue eyes and brown eyes, and how natural variation then leads us onto natural selection and evolution. And then we looked at ecosystems, and you quite possibly, I'm pointing out the back now, you went outside and threw quadrats and were meant to count daisies, but actually threw them at each other. And then we talked about biodiversity and ecosystems. So that's a quick whirlwind tour of what is in B2. So the first thing you have to do when you start revising is remind yourself of what is in the topic. There you go. I've reminded you. So what would you do next? Now, some of you I know have already started because you were revising before. But the first thing to do is to go through each section, maybe use a revision guide, maybe use BBC Bite Size, maybe use freesciencelessons.com videos, maybe use the resources that I or your teacher have shared with you in the Google Classroom. But the first thing to do that you may well have already done because you were revising for your PPEs is have flashcards for the basic facts. What are the names of the different neurons? What are the parts of the central nervous system? What are the parts of the peripheral nervous system? Where do you find the different receptors? What are the names of the different hormones? What are the glands that make them? So those things are things that you should start with. If you haven't done that already, if you don't know those things, because you are going to get assessed on this, then that's something you need to be doing this week. That's the first thing you need to do. Once you've got flashcards, and if you've already got them at home, that's brilliant. Now is the time to start doing some retrieval. And so to practice retrieval, what you have to do is look at your flashcard, turn it over, and then say what is on it. Some people will have put questions on the back so that you can read the question and then turn it over and see if you got it right. Sometimes some of you might want to FaceTime or Zoom with each other and test each other. It's a little bit easier, and also it keeps you honest if someone else is testing you rather than you testing yourself. And a good place to start is with this idea of neurons, reflex arcs, naming the hormones. That's a nice basic. So if you haven't done any B2 revision, start with that. Obviously, if you have, you need to move on through some other things. Once you think you know the stuff, use the Google quiz. There's a Google quiz in your classroom. It's at 61 marks. Now, most of it is self-marking multiple choice, and that will let you know when you click submit and you can see your marks for that, you are going to know, do I know this stuff or not? If I get 2 marks out of 60, I hadn't revised it. If on the other hand, I get 30 out of 60, well, actually, I pretty much know my stuff, and perhaps I need to look at what it was that I wasn't able to do and just go back and do a bit of revision on that. And then at the end of that quiz, there are some exam questions. They are all 6 markers. I hear people groan, but your assessments, whatever they look like, are going to contain 6 markers. And those 6 markers will get marked by your teacher, and we will be able to give you some feedback. Now, you were all prepped and ready to go on some PPEs. Next week, in fact. And so that's going to let us know as teachers. So I know 2 of my classes are here, and Miss Bush wanted me to mention her T class and the wonderful work that quite a few of you have done and how engaged you are. We're going to be able to see how good you are at those 6-mark questions and how ready you are to do those assessments. So we'll be able to help you. You're actually going to get some feedback. And then finally, you might want to go and try some exam questions. And I haven't shared those yet because people always go straight for the exam questions first. But actually, I want you to have watched this video and to try those other things before you do it. So let me remind you of a bit of the science now then. Okay, so let's talk about the nervous system. So when we're talking about the nervous system, we're always talking about this bit along the bottom here, where we've got stimulus. Let me just see if I can move that up there. No, it's not going away. We've got stimulus, we've got coordinator, receptor, coordinator, effector, and response. Okay, so the stimulus is the change in something outside us in the environment, change in light, change in temperature, change in pressure that we are able to detect. And we detect that with a receptor. For example, my eyes detect light, my ears detect sound. Those are the outside stimuli that I'm able to detect. The receptors are in my eye, my skin, my ears, and they go off to the coordinator. Now, if it's something I'm thinking about, that's my brain in my central nervous system. If it's something I'm not thinking about, that's a reflex action, then that would be my spinal cord, because that's also in my central nervous system. It then goes out to an effector. And an effector is usually a muscle, but it can also be a gland. And that makes me respond. If someone shines a bright light in my eyes, my pupils get smaller, or I look away. If I put my hand on something hot, the muscles in my arm lift it away. That's a response. So just to have a little look at those examples. So what do we actually call the nerve cells? They're neurons, remember? And we've got the receptors. So where would we find those receptors? We just need to make sure that we are clear that we've got them in the eyes, ears, taste receptors in the tongue, smell receptors in the nose, touch pressure and temperature in the skin, and changes of position in the inner ear. So we are able to tell which way up now, just to see if you're being paying attention, before I do this, move it back. I'm just going to go back through that. If you're paying attention, what's the name for a nerve cell? Been up there 2 seconds. None of you are taking part. Fantastic. 2 people have taken part. I'm going to leave it up there for about 10 seconds. Now, I know this is a nice, easy question. I put it up just a moment ago. Good. So far, half of you have answered. Everybody's got it right. I can see the questions are piling up. I am going to answer them at the end. Okay, fantastic. I'm going to end that. Most people have answered, so I'm going to end it. And the right answer was a neuron. So that's fantastic. So that's the kind of thing you're meant to be doing when you're revising, is just quickly testing yourself on some of those things there. Okay, so we'll get rid of that poll and we'll carry on with what we were doing. So I've gone through some basics of the nervous system now. So the thing that you need to do if you're making a flashcard on this is write down stimulus, receptor, coordinator, effector, and response, and write down what each one of those things is. Stimulus, examples, light, taste, change in the external environment. Receptor, what's that? Well, that's the thing in your eyes, your ears that allows you to detect it, okay? Just so that you're really clear, you need to be absolutely clear that you can answer a question on that. Then we've got different types of nerve cell. So we've got, this is a general nerve cell over here. So there it is. It's got a nucleus like an ordinary cell, but it's also got a long straggly bit that runs along the middle. And this one is ending in a muscle. So it's ending in an effector. So this sends a message along here that makes that muscle contract. And so it makes something happen. Okay. Now we call these sticky out arms dendrites, not fingers, dendrites. And that allows lots of nerve cells to join to each other. So it's got dendrites at the end. This long bit along here is called an axon. And the axon is what makes the nerve cell very long, that allows it to transmit the impulse. It's an impulse it sends from one place to another. So for it to go from the coordinator, for example, to the muscle. Okay. And we've got different types. So we have got over here, we have got hopefully a motor neuron. So a motor neuron goes to the muscle. So it's a motor neuron, it's making something move. It also goes to glands. Okay, it goes from the brain or the spinal cord to the effector. Over here, we've got a sensory neuron. That goes the other way. That goes from the sense organ, from the receptor, to the brain or spinal cord. And then finally, we've got a relay neuron. That's the one that turns the message round and sends it back again. It's a relay. It's in the middle, like handing over the baton in the relay. It hands over the impulse from the sensory to the motor neuron so it can go and do something. Okay, so let's just check. Let's do our retrieval practice. Let's go back to, let's try another poll. So let's just see if you're paying attention there. Which one of those takes the impulse to the effector out of those 3 neurons we just looked at? Some of you are quite quick off the mark there. That's fantastic. So this is looking pretty good. Although at the moment, I'm going to say it's 50-50 with the right answer. So I think some more of you should vote. See, it's creeping up now. The right answer is starting to win, but only marginally, only marginally. So I'm going to give that another 5 seconds. Some people have clearly wandered off to make a cup of tea because we're getting about 60% of people voting there. Right. So the majority of you said motor neuron, and that's correct. The motor neuron is the one that goes to the effector, to the muscle or the gland. Fantastic. So again, retrieval practice. If you didn't get that this time, then that's something you need to make a flashcard on. So what is a motor neuron? It's the one that goes from the brain or the spinal cord to the muscle or gland. Now, in an exam, that's not what they're going to do. They're not going to ask you to name which one it is. They're going to draw you a picture, and you're going to have to look at that picture and try and decide which one of them is going to a muscle. I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. Now, when you get these slides, if you click on these links here, what they will take you through to are videos that show you the required practicals. Now, you might remember doing the reaction time required practical. I'm not going to waste time in this webinar explaining this required practical to you, because some people watching will absolutely know it, and some people watching will go, oh yeah, I remember that. But if you can't write the method down, if you don't know what the control, independent and dependent variables are, you don't know it well enough to be able to answer a 6-mark exam question on it. So I strongly recommend that if you don't, that you watch that video, and that from the video you make notes. You write out a method, and you write out what I'm measuring, what I'm changing, what I'm keeping the same, so that you're clear on those things, and then you make a flashcard of it. The same with sampling organisms. That's the one where you were throwing quadrats around. And quite possibly, if you did this at the beginning of year 10 or the end of year 9, that maybe you weren't as focused as you are now on your future, and perhaps you need to watch that again just to make sure that you understand it. Of course, lots of you will completely know how it works. Just put those in there to remind you to go and look at these. So here's an example. Okay, now this is a reflex arc. I'm going to talk about what reflex arc is in a minute. But it's very common that in an exam, you would see this very diagram. So make sure you're looking at it right now. And they would label this line here, A, B, and C. And they would say, which one of these is the motor neuron? They'd have taken the labels away here, motor, relay, and sensory, and they would ask you which one was the motor neuron. And you'd be able to find it because you could find the one that was attached to the muscle. It goes to the muscle, motor, muscle. So you'd be able to find that. Or they might ask you which one is the relay neuron. Well, remember, it's the one that turns the signal round. There it is in the middle, turning the signal round. So this is a reflex arc. So what's a reflex? Well, let's just find out if you know what a reflex is by asking a quick poll. Let's see who's actually been revising already, although I think I've kind of given this one away. Everyone's gone to make a cup of tea. Oh, no, you haven't. Right, that's so good. You're getting the clue that I gave away there, because it would appear that almost everyone's got it right. Although more people have gone to make a cup of tea than before. Turn the kettle off, come back, sit down. I'm going to stop talking in a minute. Right, fantastic. So we're going to end there. So 95% if you got the right answer, which was it's a reflex. An unconscious action is a reflex. So a reflex is an unconscious action. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's think about this one about standing on a pin. Maybe not standing on a pin. Not all of us have done that. If you do, it's really horrible. I've done it once. But how about standing on a piece of Lego or a little piece of plastic toy or an upturned phone charger? We've all done that. And the instant thing that happens is you hop away from it. You might scream, you might do some other things, you might swear at the person that left it on the floor, but your foot comes away from it really quickly. And you don't have to think about that. It just happens. The same as this morning, I did possibly the stupidest thing that I've ever done. I walked into my kitchen and I went over to my kettle. My kettle's made of metal. And I thought, I wonder if someone else has boiled this already. So I put my hand on it to find out if it was still warm. The answer was it had only just boiled minutes before I walked in, and my hand comes away immediately because I got burnt. That's a reflex action. We have reflex actions to protect our body. And to make them so quick, the message doesn't actually go up your spinal cord to your brain. It gets into your spinal cord, and because the message coming is so urgent, your spinal cord just turns it straight round and sends it back out to do something straight away. Examples of that: standing on something sharp, burning yourself, bright light going into your eye and your pupil shrinking. The reason we have reflexes is to protect us from harm. That's a fact you need to know on a flashcard. And then we've got the joins between these neurons. Now, I haven't covered everything in nerves here at all. I'm going to whistle through some stuff about hormones as well. I'm giving you an example of the information you need to find and to make sure that you've gone over before you test yourself. Synapse, that's a join between two neurons. We've got the words we'd need to say. We've got an impulse comes down here. The chemical transmitter diffuses, you did that in B1, so you should know it already, across the gap and starts a new impulse on the other side. So that's a synapse and that's how it works. Now, we've also got the glands and the hormones. So here are the glands you have to know about: pituitary, thyroid, pancreas, adrenal, ovaries, and testes. You have to know what hormones they produce, and you have to know what they do. Now, a lot of these people are going to remember already. So insulin, we've got insulin and glucagon controlling blood glucose levels. We've got estrogen and testosterone, predominantly remembering about going through puberty, developing sexual characteristics. And then you might remember some of the other ones. You just need to learn them. You need to know what gland makes what hormone and what the hormones do. Now, if you're sitting there listening and you're doing a higher paper, you need to know more detail than that. You need to know how it controls the blood glucose levels, that it tells the cells to start taking in glucose and converting it into glycogen, and that those cells are the liver cells and the muscle cells. So you're going to need to find that information as well. Okay, but this is several flashcards and you need to know it. You then need to know where those glands are, and you need to know that the system, hormone system, if you like, is called the endocrine system. Okay, so there are all the glands, and the reason there are two different ones here is clearly there is a difference between male and female glands, because we've got ovaries here and we've got testes here. Okay, so the endocrine system is made up of glands, and when we say that glands make hormones, we call it secreting hormones. We say that they secrete hormones. The reason that's in green there is it's a key word and you need to use it. And that the organ that the hormone works on is called a target organ. That again is a key term and you need to write it like that. Okay, and that they go around in your blood, and when they get there, there's a response of some type. Okay, now some of them can be very fast acting. Adrenaline, if something frightens you, you step out into the road and realize there was actually a bus coming, and you step back and your heart is going because your adrenaline levels have gone up. Okay, that's a fast response. Some of them, changes that happen over puberty, take 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years. So really slow acting responses there. Okay. So there you go. Sex hormones are slow acting and produce a long-term response that's years long. Okay, so here are some questions to test yourself on. Now, when you test yourself on these, what you need to do is, hopefully, excellent. I put a slide in afterwards so you can type your answers. These are ones where your teacher could have a look at those and help you, okay, by running through them and saying, oh, it's really well done, but you might want to add things, but most of these are just 1-mark questions. So you're going to be able to find the answers to those quite easily. Okay, so now you're testing yourself, you're seeing how you're doing. Once you've tested yourself on it, you're able to do some more a little bit later on. Now, 2 of the key things you have to know about hormones, one is about blood glucose control, and for that you would therefore need to know about diabetes. You need to know about type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So we need to understand that, oh dear, that's overlapped, never mind. The type 1 is where the pancreas doesn't make enough insulin, usually starts in childhood. Treatment for that is injections of insulin. Type 2 normally responds over a long period of time later in life, and actually sometimes this can be controlled by diet. Okay, we'll run through treatment for diabetes there. I'm not going to go through what I've just said. The other thing that you need to be quite clear about is the hormonal control of the menstrual cycle. So just going to ask some questions now. I'm going to ask the question first before I say anything else. So let's just change that poll to another one. Let's hope I've got the right one. Excellent. So we're just going to try a couple of things here. Oh, this is nice and fast. Good. So this is how retrieval practice works. You've just done something, you've just looked at something, immediately take it away, test yourself. It's the act of trying to remember that makes something stay in your memory. It's not the act of looking at it. It's the act of recalling it that puts it further and further into your memory. So I can tell now that 35 of you are probably not going to forget this between now and doing it again, because you've got it this time already. So at the moment, we've got 82% of you got it right. It looks like it's stopping. It looks like everyone else has decided again to make a cup of tea, watch Netflix instead of me. I'm on mute in the background. But there we go. Let's share the results. It was endocrine system. Well done, endocrine system. So menstrual cycle. Let's just check that there's a little bit of understanding here as well. So this is just a simple question. All right. Now, it's really important there that I put the word on average, because when they ask you a question in the exam, they are asking for an on average number. Okay. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to make about 50% of the people watching annoyed, irritated, or upset, but I'm going to put absolute money on the fact that there are, at the moment, 34% of the people have not got this completely correct. And I reckon that at least 99% of them are male. Okay. Just saying, because that is how this normally works. So there we go. I'm going to share that the right answer was 28 days. Now, 28 days is the answer you have to give in the exam. Obviously, that's on average. So for some people, it's slightly less than 28 days. For some people, it's slightly more than 28 days. The average number, if you average all of that out, is 28 days. So that's the number that you always have to give in the exam. So you need to be able to explain what happens in the menstrual cycle. So the egg in the ovary gets stimulated to mature. It gets released into the fallopian tube. It travels along. The lining of the uterus gets ready for that. If not, it's all shed. Okay, and that's what's called a period. You need to know that in that order, those four things. And then you need to know that there are 4 hormones that control it. You need to know a little bit more than that. You need to know which one causes an egg to stimulate in the ovaries, which one causes the egg to be released, and so on. If you go back all the way through here to my slide on endocrine system, I'm just going to run back through here, and there we go. So we've got which one does which. Egg development, okay, we've got that happening over there. So if you're doing the higher tier, you might need to look up a little bit more information from that. So there you go. I've just run through the first 2 parts of B2. That's all I've done, just the first 2 parts. So now you can find out, do you know enough about those first 2 parts? You could answer these questions, okay? So this is the end of the slide. You could answer those questions. So I'm going to stop sharing that slide for a moment. Okay, now, so these slides are just the beginning of your B2 revision. So you need to go through that. When you have done that, the next thing that you're able to go back to, let me just go back through this. Okay, you then go to the Google quiz that's over here. So there you can see B2 quiz. That B2 quiz, if you open it, in fact, let's open one and let me show. So a lot of it is nice, simple. You need to read it here, and that's deliberate because when you do your exams, lots of you miss where it says give 2 answers. You've got 2 answers there, and you've got those down there as well. And you go through and give those answers. They're all very short and they will come straight back to you. This is on the whole of B2. So if you think you've revised B2, if you think you're ready, then actually do this. Okay, this is I think I'm ready. Down the bottom, okay, are 6-mark questions. There are 4 6-mark questions. Those are going to get marked by your teachers. That's going to tell us, are you ready? Are you actually ready to do a B2 assessment? So what you then get back from this is how ready you are to do B2. And then you have to make a decision. Do I need to go away and revise more of this? Is there just one thing that I need to pick out of this that I need to revise? Or do I now feel confident that I could get my target grade given a B2 assessment? Okay. The final thing that isn't there yet are some exam questions to practice on after you've done this. Your teachers aren't going to put those in any of your Google Classrooms until this and those other questions have been done. Okay, so I'm just going to stop sharing those there. Okay, and let's go to these things over here. So let's have a little look. Let's see if I can answer any of these questions. So I'm just going to run through. I know that Miss has answered some of these, but I'm going to read out some of these questions and go through. And what I'm going to do first is I am going to stop recording now because I'm not talking about any more science. This will go on